Hey dudes, it's Lerald. It's 3:38 a.m. here, and I have a Toxic Rain Pathfinder update. But first, we have some news. We finally opened a Discord. We opened it last night and did a 3 to 4 hour stream to celebrate, and we just wrapped that up like 45 minutes ago, and now here we are. I want to take a moment and give credit to Sunset. Path of Evening and WoW at Night absolutely would not exist without her. She also set up the Discord.
So join our Discord because you guys asked for it and now it's here.
All right, let's get into Toxic Rain. So the character is pretty much coming along the way that I had wanted it to, but with a couple of little tweaks that I've made based off of the initial PoB. You know, I've been down this road before, right? I kind of had a game plan for what I wanted Toxic Rain to be, and for the most part, I feel like I've kind of stuck to it. So the biggest question that we had coming into the league was whether that crafted +2 level of socketed support gems modifier would still exist. And thankfully it does. It is still a crafting bench option. It just comes from Tower Map, which I think Tower Map's like a tier 14 baseline map, something like that. So you'll get it probably before you're at the point where you're ready to craft a map or craft a bow anyway, but you know, it's available. Like you can see here, you can craft a pretty classic, pretty decent Toxic Rain bow. Chaos.multi also still craftable. Basically all of the mods that you ever needed are still craftable. Now, they did remove some of the socketed AoE gems, specifically the gloves, crafted socketed AoE gems, and +1 level of socketed AoE gems, and like 10% increased area of effect. That was removed from gloves, but they added the old % increased area of effect and area damage modifier that used to be on necks. They added that to gloves, so you can just still get 10% or so from your helm. And then, like, I'm using, I think the, like, 1 tier down from the tier 1 crafted version because it costs like a couple of chaos instead of exalts, just being a bit cheap, but very easy to fix area that way. And then non-channeling mana cost prefixes still exist, so I've done that on all 3 of my, my 2 rings and my amulet. So with having done that, I've gotten my mana costs on Toxic Rain between that and the Searing Exarch reduced mana cost of attacks helm implicit. And then all of the standard stuff I talked about in the tree, you know, taking Thrill of Battle here. I have managed to get my Toxic Rain cost down to 1 mana, which is pretty nice because it sets you up to then run a Manaforged arrow setup. So this is something I talked about previously. It was kind of the biggest change that I made like pretty late in the game. I waited all the way until I had like a properly set up thicket bow in order to do that. Prior to this, I was, like I discussed before, kind of in the like very early game setup, I was using just like a short bow, a porcupine bow, you know, 6 porcupine div cards, hand that in, and then slap Essences of Dread to get that guaranteed +2 level of socketed bow gems. Basically just slap Essences of Dread until you get a baseline attack speed mod, and then craft Chaos.multi. I use that all the way up through the first 2 Void Stones, basically all the way up until the final push to get Void Stones 3 and 4, and that is where the Thicket Bow then came in. That difference in single target damage from having this proper Thicket Bow is pretty huge. And at the same time as making that upgrade to having, you know, +1 level of socketed gems and 2 to socketed support gems, I also went out and bought an Empower support. Prior to that point, I just used like a more duration support red gem. You know, that works pretty well early on. Empower obviously is better once you have the properly crafted Thicket Bow to really support it, though. So getting 5 levels onto your Toxic Rain is huge. And I still don't have like a + level neck. Obviously, that's an upgrade. My quiver is also pretty bad. I don't have like baseline attack speed or crafted attack speed on it, so that's not great. But it was good enough to kill Uber Elder Deathless. It was good enough to do a Elder Slayer invitation after my Mercenary died, which did on stream. And yeah, that was a real... unlike Uber Elder, that was a real tough one because it took me all 6 portals to actually pull that out. All right, one thing I wanted to include, I got into editing and realized I'd forgotten, was just this little node here. I mentioned it in the video before, talking about doing the campaign. I found that this node here, prior to like getting myself all the way down to like 1 mana cost on the Toxic Rain, this node was insanely helpful for keeping mana fixed. I used this all the way up to like level 90. This was incredibly, incredibly strong. Once you get mana fixed, totally irrelevant, totally worthless. But prior to that point, I know it seems like the craziest thing that just like 2 mana on hit is like all you need. But it really was like a game changer. So definitely lean on this if you're having any mana issues. You can also use Eldritch Battery, but I never did. I'm probably not going to look back. Like, I'm probably done with Eldritch Battery for the foreseeable future just because it's kind of nice not having to think about Energy Shield, except it's like an extra little bit of defense, and really good to be able to very quickly and smoothly transition into Manaforged Arrows in the first weekend of the league instead of like waiting for a long time. So with all that being said, once the build finally has kind of come online here, it feels really tanky. I'm really able to tank like quite a lot of damage. I'm not face tanking Shaper Slams or anything like that, but I am really feeling the tankiness that comes from Kintsugi and from the Mercenary. She is really carrying me. You know, the difference between having a Mercenary active and providing all of the different damage and damage reduction debuffs through doing tons of chill, thanks to like Ahuana's Bite and Call of the Void, Pain Seeker, you know, all of the rest of this stuff. We made a video talking about this yesterday in quite a lot of detail, and the only real difference, the only real thing that I've upgraded since that video is just simply I got a pair of Pain Seeker gloves that had a decent roll on them, 178% for that bottom roll there, and also have Despair on hit. This does work. She'll be despairing stuff for me, so that's pretty helpful to not have to like hard cast Despair onto bosses. I'm just getting it out of my Merc. Other than that, you know, it's pretty much all the same stuff that I discussed yesterday, except that I was able to replace my previous level 81 Ice Shot Mercenary with level 83 Ice Shot Mercenary, a little bit tankier, and then she also has Grace, so that's like kind of a free aura for me, which is nice. Now, I talked previously about Mercenary stuff, talked quite a bit about Mercenary stuff, actually, and one thing that I am considering doing with the Mercenary instead of running this, I guess another change that I've made is I'm running specifically like a cold and lightning damage bow with just like a physical modifier. Not really worrying as much about fire because I'm guaranteeing ignites all the time, and I get a little bit of fire damage out of Winter Weave, so that's all I need. I don't care if the ignite is like 1 damage, it just needs to be on there to convert enemy damage into fire thanks to Pyro Shock Clasp. This would be fine if it were cold, lightning, and fire as well, but it's really just I want the cold and lightning to be very large, so the chills are very large, and they're consistently 30%, and also so the shocks will be large. So one thing I am considering doing in order to like really push this to its limit is switching over to a Voltaxic Rift. These are not cheap at all. Like, this would be more than I've spent on my entire character, so I'm not looking to do this like quickly. There we go, 10 Divines. So yeah, that is a lot. Definitely more than I'm ready to spend on a Mercenary right now. But by getting this, you would be able to convert all of the lightning damage into chaos. So you would just build as much lightning damage as possible on your Mercenary. And then your chaos damage shocks, and it shocks as though doing triple damage. And your max shock is like, what is that, 90% instead of 50? And so then you would just build everything else because all of your damage is able to chill thanks to Call of the Void, and then you're able to like get Ignite out of running like Winter Weave and Rash Kaldar's Patience together. I would just build everything else around trying to get as much lightning damage as possible. I may not use Pain Seeker at that point. I may try and go for more lightning. You know, definitely still more to work out. I've got some time to figure it out in the time between when I'm ready to drop at least 10 Divines on a Mercenary, but basically I would build everything around just trying to get as much lightning damage as possible while also still getting chill out of all of that because of Call of the Void. I would also be benefiting her because I am withering the hell out of everything that I attack, thanks to the Manaforged Arrow setup that I have where I have Toxic Rain of Withering in place. So whenever I Toxic Rain, I'm automatically triggering a Toxic Rain of Withering. Basically, I'm guaranteeing that everything has maximum Wither all the time. And then also in that Manaforged Arrow setup, I'm using Frenzy and then Snaring Arrow and then Culling Strike. And the Culling Strike is, you know, it's just built-in Cull, so really good for bossing. And then I played around with GMP, I played around with Awaken Arrow Nova support. GMP, I think, is actually better. It's cheaper. You know, you could go buy it from an NPC. And it actually works with Toxic Rain of Withering. Like, you only get 5 arrows out of Toxic Rain of Withering if you have Awaken Arrow Nova support, because it doesn't work together, whereas GMP, I think, will add another 4 arrows. But on the other hand, I did buy the Awaken Arrow Nova support. I feel like I should use it, and it does work with Ensnaring Arrow and Frenzy, and it works exactly the same way that Arrow Nova support does with Caustic Arrow, where it shoots them out in all different directions, but Awakened gives you an extra projectile, 5 extra projectiles, so 6 directions instead of 5. Again, we're only really using the Frenzy and the Ensnaring Arrow just to like slow enemies, but that's a good enough justification, right? Makes it harder for them to get out of the Toxic Rains. Gives you frenzy charges, that's pretty much it. And the Toxic Rain of Withering is just to make your Toxic Rain do more damage because everything's withered. So I think that would have good synergy with Voltaxic Rift on the Mercenary. Yeah, her doing everything is chaos damage, shocking, counting as like triple effect, plus all of the stuff from Painseeker as well, and the Amulet Anoint Ash Frost and Storm. So should be getting like really huge shocks out of that setup once it's all pulled together, but we're not there yet. That's fine. So in terms of the tree, for the most part, I've really stuck to the build that I had set up initially. The only real thing that I've done different here is just simply like, I am approaching the level where I should have already put Cluster Jewels in, and I just haven't yet. So like, I took some points here in replenishing remedies just to get like a bit more flask charge generation, really. And I did also come over here to Constitution. That's why I have like 5,400 life. I also took the Flask Mastery that gives you life when you use a flask. That's nice. And then just because I had like a couple extra, like an extra point, instead of taking this crappy life regen node, I took these two also not that great dot multi nodes instead. Now, once I'm ready to like go get a Cluster Jewel, probably like right after I finish making this video, start rolling that up. I'm going to drop this wheel, the Replenishing Remedies wheel. I'm going to drop the Flask Mastery. Going to probably drop all of the Growth and Decay wheel and the travel nodes to it. And I might wind up dropping Constitution and maybe Sentinel too if I don't need the 10% all res, and use that to like build into a Cluster Jewel setup, which would look more like this tree. Right, so I think I would basically go for like this kind of a setup here. I think right now, I'll have to double check my gear, but I think right now I have like enough spell suppression from the tree that I don't need any from gear at all. I might have to change things around in order to make this setup work, and then like, you know, drop these 3 points, quick step, and the points around it that give move speed and suppression. It is nice to have quick step still, so I might still be hanging on to that while I'm just doing kind of some speed farming stuff, and just drop some of the like damage stuff up here from Growth and Decay instead. Ultimately, I think there's nothing too essential in the difference between like what I'm running in this setup, where I actually had enough spell suppression that I didn't need to run Mage Bane. I just ran the 15% from the Evasion Mastery. You know, maybe I could move some things around, but nothing all that huge in terms of difference between like this setup in the tree here and this setup that I'm running, other than the Cluster Jewels, which are, just to look at that difference, half of my damage or something. So pretty huge damage increase to get those Cluster Jewels. Vitally important once you're able to do it. And it also really helps with Flask Sustain by taking a Flask Effect Duration Cluster Jewel. You're able to get Spiked Concoction, which gives you Alchemist Genius. Alchemist Genius, every time you use a flask, you get, I think it's like a 4 or 5 second buff. And it's like increased Flask Effect, increased Flask Charge Generation. So very, very big. All right, so just one little thing that I kind of want to touch on is the Manaforged Arrows setup. It's not mandatory. Like, you could absolutely, I could drop all of this Manaforged Arrow stuff and still just be using the old Caustic Arrow setup that I was using instead, and walking around tapping Caustic Arrow to clear and then blasting bosses with regular Toxic Rain. The main reason that I've gone with this setup, the Manaforged Arrows on all these support gems, basically, like, not support gems, Frenzy, Ensnaring Arrow, Toxic Rain of Withering, you know, active skills that are performing a supportive role to base Toxic Rain. The reason that I've gone with this setup instead of that Caustic Arrow is the clear speed is really fast and the Mercenary is really helping with that. So I just don't feel that I need like the extra keybind in bossing. Bossing is really like my weakest part, and this 6-link in the body armor really helps with that. It also doesn't need to be a 6-link. Like, I could absolutely get away with like not having Culling Strike or not having Ensnaring Arrow. If it were a 5-link, that would be the first thing I would drop, and then a Culling Cull would be the second thing I'd drop, and then, you know, kind of go from there. There is one other thing that I have managed to fit into my build because I don't have an Enlightened gem yet, and I am getting Grace from a Mercenary, so I don't feel like I need to get that myself. And that would be Arctic Armor. I've been using that as opposed to using like Petrified Blood or something like that. Arctic Armor gives you freeze immune, so you don't have to run Brine King. I've been running Lunaris instead for more move speed and like a little bit more fizz damage reduction in mapping. But also just the 21% less fizz damage taken from hits and fire damage taken from hits for that matter is like pretty significant. It only counts when you're stationary, but the thing is, when you're moving, you're like so much less likely to get hit. It's really only when you stand still and attack that you get hit, and it's like a problem. And so I think Arctic Armor is like super underappreciated on top of giving you that freeze immunity, which is great. And like reactive chill is also fine. Then I have been using a Chaos Golem as well. I just summon it sometimes. Sometimes I remember to do it, sometimes I don't. For a while I was self-casting Despair just on bosses, and then once I got that onto Mercenary Gloves, I completely quit doing that. And I've really enjoyed not having to do that. But otherwise, you know, it's a standard aura setup like Malevolence and Haste. Pretty normal. Using Arctic Armor to kind of fill in, and then just to fill in the rest of the mana cost, I am using like a level 1 Clarity and a level 1 Vitality, and the main reason for that is because of, I think it's this passive here, the Reservation Mastery that gives you 8% increased damage for each aura or herald affecting you. You know, technically speaking, I could maybe try and even fit in a Precision. It wouldn't do anything useful for me. I guess I could fit it in instead of Despair now that I'm getting it from my Mercenary. The point would just simply be another 8% increased damage. It's probably only like 1% more damage, but that is more than 0, so might as well. You can also throw in more MTX, which I've done. So I think that's another thing I'm going to do as soon as the video is done. I'm going to turn this into a green socket, just, you know, reroll this helm a bit, throw in a level 1 Precision, not for any purpose other than more MTX, tiny bit more damage. All right, so I think that pretty much wraps everything up. Just looking at the tree and just thinking about like the campaign experience. My RNG on like sockets, like getting 3 greens together was really bad. But you know, I had a good time playing the character. It was very like nostalgic, for great feeling going back. I still feel like the route that I go through the Ascendancy is all correct. You know, Nature's Reprisal first, Adrenaline and Master Surgeon next, then finishing with Nature's Boon. That's all correct. I think the only other thing that I've done different from the setup in the tree at all, or in the PoB at all, is I've just been using a Sulfur Flask as my number 2. Just like I didn't need a Resistance Flask to cap because I am using Kintsugi instead of Lightning Coil these days. You know, if you are using Lightning Coil, then I think Topaz Flask is the right move. This isn't like a great flask, right? Sulfur isn't like a ton of damage, but it's something. You could just as easily use a Gold Flask. I think I just don't have the currency to make a Gold Flask automate itself right now. I don't think I have enough, oh, I do have enough glass blower. Okay, another chore for after the video's done, I suppose, to set up a Gold Flask here instead of the Sulfur. I don't think I need Sulfur anymore. But, you know, it's kind of useful when my damage was absolute garbage to have just literally anything to make it slightly better. Otherwise, Silver and Quicksilver, very normal. These like the suffixes aren't great. They're again just kind of what I settled on. You know, they're working for now. The Life Flask was the one flask that I really got squared away very early on into endgame, and was very happy with the state of this Life Flask. It was like the one piece of gear that really came together very early on, very effectively. Okay, final thing I want to touch on. We don't have to use Recombinator Bows, like, yet, at least. You know, we can craft this bow. I already mentioned that before, but I have still taken some time to, like, set aside a Thicket Bow quad tab, and I will be recombinating Thicket Bows together, because even though I think the currently available best setup is probably Widow Hail, I do think long-term, like I talked about in the video that I made, like, shortly before the League came out, I do think that the best setup for a bow for Toxic Rain is going to be something that you recombinate together, and it has like 5 real mods on it and then just 1 final crafted mod on it, rather than like wasting an entire mod on the multi-mod setup. So I do think that's ultimately going to wind up being better than Widow Hail, and so I'm already just stockpiling tons of Thicket Bows in order to slam them together in the Recombinator. I've been doing Settlers League. That's been the main thing that I've been running, along with like Maven invitation rotas. So that's kind of what I've been up to. That's how the build's coming along. It pretty easily cruised through everything, other than like some early bad damage while I was still getting mercenaries kind of figured out. I think it's been pretty great, and I've really been having a lot of fun with this league. I think the league start was rough for everyone, but I finally feel like I'm back on track as of tonight. The mercenary mechanic is awesome. S-tier mechanic, absolutely love it. So despite the bad start, I think this is going to be an amazing league. Alright, that's it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and consider becoming a channel member so we can do this full time. Thanks for watching, have fun playing Toxic Rain, and be sure to join the Discord and say hi to us. Bye.